Hey everybody, welcome back to Calgary Barbell. We're here today for another episode of Form Check Friday, the show where we take your user-submitted videos, we put them up on this screen behind me, and we're going to critique them, try to make you all a little bit better lifters, show you where you can make maybe a few changes to increase your efficiency, and generally try to help people lift a little better. So if you're interested in submitting, go ahead and submit to FORMCHECKFRIDAY@gmail.com, and don't forget to tune in for our live stream every Friday. We don't have a set time just yet. It's usually midday MST. So somewhere in there, we usually do a live stream for about an hour or so. We do a lot of form checks live. So if you are able to, go ahead and tune in. We try to live stream every Friday. Our first submission here today comes from Gareth Lloyd. He said he'd be interested to see if I have any ways for him to improve. He said he feels like his upper back has been losing tightness and he's been implementing front squats to fix it. So he's got 3 reps with 220 kilos here. And we're gonna take a look. All right, Gareth, let's see what you got, man. So it looks really, really efficient to me. I don't honestly see much issue. I think I see what you're talking about. There is this tiny little moment of collapse just in the shoulder blade positioning, but I don't think that that's something I'd be super concerned about. Have to kind of see with a higher RPE or higher rep set, but losing that little bit of positioning might just be a result of being a little bit too far extended to start off with. So if you allow yourself, instead of trying to be here, I see what we're saying there. So we are sort of losing the shoulders forward as opposed to staying over the bar here. So the biggest thing is just going to be creating and building more tension in through here, trying to keep those lats glued down. The other thing that might help is starting with a bit higher hip position. So instead of being here, if we could be maybe here with the quad, get the hip height just a tiny bit higher. That can help you sort of anticipate this shift in the lower body, because we are seeing a bit of a shift in the lower body leading to us pitching forward. So I think first off, we work on building tension here, really pinching those lats down a little harder to try to hold that extension, create a little bit of patience and be patient off the floor. Try not to let yourself get pulled out of position, especially with warm-up sets. This is something you can practice. And the other thing is I would get those knees back is a good way to think about it as well, in terms of adjusting the hip height up just a little so that we don't see this shift when we start pulling, because that shift is contributing to us getting out over the bar. But to be honest, by the time you get the bar off the floor, everything looks pretty damn dialed in. So it's going to be a little bit of tightening up in that start position, and maybe not starting, it looks like you're almost starting behind the bar here. So I would allow yourself to, like I said, sit a little higher, get those knees back a little further, keep this nice and tight, and see if that doesn't help fix your starting position. Hopefully that all made sense. Alrighty, our next email comes from Jordan Visca. And this is from his first powerlifting meet, 202.5. He wants to know if we think he should switch to sumo. He really wants to try to get to nationals, but he would need a 230 kilo deadlift realistically to get there. So Jordan, let's take a look at your deadlift, man, and see what we think about the potentials of you. Oh, look at this. Look at Calgary Barbell shirt right there. This is at, I'm not sure which APU meet this is. Maybe this was up north a little bit. All right. Let's take a look and see if you should think about the evils of sumo deadlifting. So honestly, to me, that looks pretty good. It's tough to see from this angle because we can't really see much of what your back and hips are doing. There is a little bit of the hips kind of rising before we get that bar off the floor. This looks to me like a really good start position, but you can see the hips just kind of shoot just a tiny bit. But if this is like a third attempt, then you know, that's pretty normal. The one thing I'm seeing that I'm not a big fan of is right here. See how he throws his knees in under the bar like that? That's something that I would watch out for. Try to stay back on those heels and finish from back here as opposed to putting your knees in. You put the knees in too much, and then we get into what's called hitching, and we can get some red lights for that. All in all, very good pull. In terms of your question and whether or not you should try sumo out, honestly, I would recommend definitely try it. Use it as maybe a secondary lift and just see how each pull advances, see how your conventional feels compared to your sumo. And worst case scenario, it's going to be probably a decent training tool to help your conventional advance. And best case scenario, maybe you discover that sumo style deadlifting is a little bit more, a little bit stronger for you, maybe a little bit more of an advantage based on leverages. So long story short, you're gonna have to try it out. I can't look at this and tell you whether or not you should sumo deadlift, but I definitely recommend trying it out if you haven't before. You might have one of those aha moments and it might just click and feel way better. It did for me. So give that a shot and hopefully that helps you out there, man. Our next one comes from Ibrahim, and he's 19 years old. He's living in Scotland. He's a recreational lifter. He's been lifting for 2 years. He says he's unsure about his deadlift form. He has some lumbar rounding and wanted our help in addressing this. He hopes to get featured, as this rounding typically occurs every time he tries to push his deadlift numbers higher. This wave in the lumbar area, he calls it. So let's take a look. Ibrahim. I'm not sure if those two are pronounced the same based on the spelling, so we'll go with that. So this to me doesn't look like there's any rounding at all. This might not have been the best set to send because we don't really see that fault occurring. The other thing is a little bit of rounding is not a big deal. This is also off of blocks, so I'm imagining it's tougher for you to stay tight off the floor. But it looks like you're able to create and hold a pretty neutral position, which generally speaking is a good thing. It does look like we're pulling into almost a bit excessive extension here. So working on bracing as a whole, trying to get the shoulder blades down. I know I always preach on that. And ribs down in the front. So we want to try to create tension all around the trunk. And I'm drawing some terrible circles here, but hopefully you guys know what I mean. We want tension, so if this is the ribs right here, and these are the hips, we want to try to create tension here, but here as well, and then all the way around, right? So we want to try to lock in front and back, and it looks like right now you're just really pulling a lot of extension and focusing on creating tension through there, as opposed to thinking here, as opposed to thinking about obliques, as opposed to trying to create tightness through the trunk as a whole. I think we're falling into focusing too much on the back. So while this looks good, part of the issue with not being able to find a comfortable or efficient spinal position, back position, might be that we're not focusing enough on bracing throughout the entire trunk, and we're focused very, very solely on like extending the low back. The other thing is I would definitely pull from the floor if you can. If you can get into a good position, that's going to be the number one best way to help strengthen you off the floor, is going to be pulling off the floor, believe it or not. So hopefully if we can change the way you're thinking about bracing as a whole, don't worry so much about trying to get the maximum extension here. I know that is something I preach about a lot. It's something I rag on people for a lot, but it is not the be all end all. It's more important that we have a tight, rigid trunk and torso with pressure downwards, front, back, and laterally on both sides, than it is that we see this sort of excessive curvature there. So hopefully all of that makes sense. And it does look like as we came off the floor on that rep, we can kind of see what you're talking about. So we get into this really extended position here, and as we go, we can see the back start to round out. We see the shoulder blades start to creep up, which tells me there isn't enough tension here in terms of trying to essentially tie the shoulder blades into the rest of the trunk. So that's another thing there, is we're starting to outrun the hips. See how the hips are starting to push in and we're loosening here. So that's causing this extension. So keep trunk tightness throughout the whole lift. Don't exaggerate that hip extension at the top. And let's focus on bracing all around, not just in the low back. Hopefully that makes sense, buddy. All right, moving on. Our next one comes from Dax Grindler. This is a video of today's max triple at 165 kilos. This is the most he's ever done for a triple. During his strength blocks, he'll have a week where he'll either do a max triple or 4 to 5 rep max weight on his main 3 lifts. Sounds a little conjugate, little max effort to me. 6 weeks ago, I hit 160 for 4 at 73 kilos body weight. Today, I hit 165 for 3 at 75 kilos body weight. He's prepping for his first meet with CPL on June 16th in Victoria. And thank you for taking the time to form check my video. You're very welcome, Dax. Let's take a look. All right, Dax. So we're doing some squats here. I feel like we looked at some of your lifts before. This gym looks familiar. Your tattoos actually look familiar. I think we looked at some deadlifts of yours before, maybe some bench press. But anyways, so we've got some squats going on. This is a max effort triple. So first thing is I would work on your walkout. Let's count the steps. So we pick up, looks good and solid. We got 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, wiggle, wiggle, 4 step, 5 step, set. So that's gonna be a bit of an energy leak, a bit of a waste of energy. Not a big thing to pick apart, but definitely something that's gonna make everything feel a lot tighter, a lot more locked in if we can minimize the amount of movement we're doing with a heavy weight on our back. So it looks pretty locked in, nice and tight through the trunk. Good. Relatively high bar position here. As per usual, I would advocate for trying maybe a bit of a lower bar position, especially with how we're getting a little bit tipped forward out of the bottom on some of these reps. Yeah. So strong, not losing position too badly, but it looks very much like a high bar squat to me. Now, what I would probably play with is trying to get the bar. See how there's this like bulge of delt right here and right here? Is I would get the bar, it's probably only gonna move, see I can't draw worth crap, but it's probably only gonna move like a 1/2 inch or so, but the bar a little bit lower down the back so it's on the rear delts. As opposed to, sorry, the mouse is not good for fine movements here. But you get what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to move that bar down a little bit. The other thing is we are breaking at the knees only when we start these squats. So we have this like tuck of the pelvis. You can very, very faintly see here. He's trying to, he's trying to like tuck his pelvis underneath. We can see that little shift there. So that might be, one of the useful cues that he uses for bracing. And then when we start, the knees unlock before the hips, well before the hips. So what this is gonna do is it's gonna keep you very upright until we can't be upright anymore. And we see this big change in trunk positioning, especially on this second rep, into and out of the hole. So big breath, we're braced. Knees break first, we come down here, and then as we get into the bottom, we see this big shift in trunk position. The bar starts to roll. So there's a couple things. With the bar rolling like that, that tells me that one of the things I would investigate is your grip width, potentially a little wider, maybe play with thumb around instead of very close, thumbs behind, like a false grip, as opposed to very close and with the thumbs around, as well as that lower bar position like I was saying. The other big thing is gonna be when you initiate your squat, allow yourself to lean. You need to anticipate a certain amount of lean because we can't get, unless your like femurs are this long, we're not gonna be able to stay that upright throughout the squat. We're gonna need some hip flexion. So when we start the squat, I can see there's a little bit of pushing back there, but I'm guessing that if we could see, his heels would probably be coming up just a little bit, and that's something that I would work on, but just push those hips back a little bit more as you start. Hips back a little bit more as you start, because that way we're not getting as much like fighting for position throughout the rep, because it looks like the legs are plenty strong here, but the trunk and the bar position and the upper back is where we're having issues. So that would be where I would focus on. And even just based on like how shaky or like unstable we look and appear here when we're doing this sort of exaggerated many step walkout, like the bar doesn't look glued to your back as well as it should. It doesn't look like you're actively pulling the bar into your back or able to. So I think there's a number of ways we can get tighter through the trunk, as well as push those hips back a tiny bit more as you start the rep, as opposed to starting with the knees and then flexing the hip halfway down. Alrighty, our last one here comes from Alpercan. He's from Turkey. He says he's 16, he follows us, and he loves us. We love you too, Alpercan. Let's check my deadlift form. Let's. Thanks. All right. Let us take a look. So it looks like, first off, we're pulling from some blocks here, but I'm gonna guess that's because these plates are a smaller diameter than normal competition plates. They look a little bit small to me. So this is probably just putting you at the normal height. So let's see. Good. Do we get a second rep? No. All right. So all told, this actually looks quite good. We get a little bit of shift back on the heels, which tells me we probably could start a little further back on the heels. See how the knees shift back? And this is what I was telling that first lifter, is we can keep those knees back. That way we don't experience this shifting off the floor. So if we started more like this, then we would just pull pretty much straight from there. So we're looking good, knee extension, and then right around here, the knee extension stops. And we start trying to pull the back through and trying to pull a bunch of back extension and hip extension here. What that does is that's gonna keep the knees forward while the back is working this way against it, and the hip extension is working this way against it. So this lever is going back, and this knee joint is staying where it is. So essentially you're pulling the bar through the knee joint, which can be problematic, right? So we got the knee here, we're trying to pull the bar. What we want is we want the bar to go straight up so it goes past the knee joint. When we start pulling back too early, we come up, and then we go back into the knee joint by pulling back here and with the hips. So we're pulling back and knee extension here, essentially pulling the bar into the hip, or sorry, into the knee, which is somewhat self-defeating, right? We're making it harder for ourselves by pulling into our knee joint, as opposed to continuing to push straight up with knee extension, holding this angle solid, and extending at the knee until the knee is more extended. And there, at that point, the bar will be past or close to past the knee, and then we can pull back and up. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. And it also, when we got to lockout, if we just watch really quickly, because we're not back far enough on the heels, I just want everybody to watch this foot just for a quick second as we go through lockout. So there's a little bit of bouncing around, a little bit of shift. Right as we get to lockout, we're a little forward and the weight kind of has to settle on the feet. This should be locked in, especially right here on the heel. And yeah, so we get this like little bit of back and forth, potentially tough to balance with heavier weights. So that would be the other thing I would work on. Stay rooted through your heels a little harder. Don't pull back until the knees are closer to locked. Keep that knee extension going through to the finish of the lift, and I think that'll shape up for you. All right, everybody, that is it for today's Form Check Friday. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves and learned something. If you have any questions about anything I commented on, or if you noticed something in the videos that I didn't, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit the like button. If you want to stay tuned for more content like this, hit the subscribe button. And either way, we'll see you guys in the next video.